This is going to be my findings and interpretation for Ashley Weaver of her OPEX body move and work assessment. Starting with Ashley's OPEX body, from the in-body scan, her weight was 138. Her lean body mass is 101. Body fat percentage is at 26.6. Her basal metabolic rate is 1,366. On her muscle fat analysis, she's a type 2 I shape. She's got balanced composition. I would still consider increasing skeletal muscle mass while decreasing her body fat. She's currently at skeletal muscle mass of 56.2 with a body fat mass of 36.8. So pretty well balanced, but we'd still like to shift that around just a tiny bit. Her body fat percentages are within the healthy range for a female adult. For performance bases and for the client's current goals, we'd like to decrease her body fat percentage by about 4 to 6%, slowly taking her into a caloric deficit throughout that time frame. Once we look at her nutrition log, we'll get a good idea of where her current calorie intake or consumption is at. From there, we'll base a nutrition prescription according to dropping her body fat or decreasing her body fat and then increasing her lean muscle mass. Moving on to OPEX move for Ashley, starting with the scratch test and starting on the left side. I have her with the left side as an upper as a fail. She had a slight head tilt to get into position. Head had to move forward as well to be able to get in position. She had a winged scapula. Range of motion of the shoulder and extension was lacking. She also was struggling. She couldn't get her arm quite into a vertical position in line with her hips. I'll equate all of that to really just kind of a shoulder range of motion and lack of extension there. She was able to maintain a solid core position, so just something that I should keep in mind later on down the road. Sticking to that left side on the lower now, just a lack of range of motion. She could get it behind her. She had to manipulate her body slightly in order to get her hand behind. She couldn't get it too far up the shoulder. So lacking range of motion, internal and external rotation, as well as extension into the shoulder. T-spine looked pretty good within that testing. Moving on, scratch test to the right side. On the upper side, I have Ashley as a fail on this one as well. Kind of the same things that I found on the left side, I found on the right side again. She had to really tilt the head in order to get into a position. Once she got into a position, her head was tilted slightly forward. She had a winged scapula on that side as well. I'll equate that to range of motion of the shoulder as well as extension, internal rotation, and external rotation of the shoulder and the shoulder blade. On the lower side, just a lack of range of motion again, just kind of struggling and manipulating her body to get into position. And then the distance between two hands on both sides was quite relevant. It was a pretty good distance between the two. So something that I'll keep in mind inside of program design. I'll kind of target this with single arm pressing exercises, bilateral pressing exercises, horizontal and vertical pressing and pulling, kind of work on that scapula. We'll also incorporate some carries, overhead carries, some wader carries, some bottom up carries to work on some shoulder stability as well. Moving on to Ashley's squat. She was a pass in the squat pattern. She had a slight shifting of the weight just a little forward at the bottom of the squat, so I'll take a look at the ankles a little bit more in that position. Her arms come slightly forward, but she's able to still maintain a position of a slightly inclined torso while still being able to maintain a shoulder position. She had a slight collapsing of the ankles at the bottom position, causing a slight valgus knee fault. She had a slight loss of lumbar integrity once she hit the bottom of the squat, something that I'm not too concerned about. Also have her move within full ranges of motion. I'll just be more cautious whenever we move through external loaded movements. In order to target all of the findings in her squat, even though Ashley was a pass, I'll use loaded squat variations, time under tension, core exercises. Primarily, I'll focus on some isometric core exercises and some carries. single leg split exercises, and then we'll do some RNT for the ankles, and then also focus on some mobility. Since we're doing RNT on the ankles as well, I'll probably add some RNT into the knees just because it's going to be following upstream to reassure that it's not just the ankles and that the knees are being nice and stable via the hips. Moving on to Ashley's lunge on the right side, she was a pass. The only thing I found with her lunge was she has a tendency to not want to stand all the way up. She has the ability, but you'll see in the video, she just kind of lacked that full extension to the top position until the very last rep. Lunge on the left side, Ashley was a pass. She had a slight loss of balance. I'll equate that mainly to just body and positional awareness for the first rep. Once she got through the last couple reps, she had a lot more balance and stability. Just to focus on the lunges on both sides, we'll use lunge variations with time under tension. Ashley's toe touch was a pass. No real big discrepancies in the toe touch. Hamstring length and flexibility looked extremely good. Integrity of the spine looked good going down into flexion and extension. Active straight leg raise starting on the right side for Ashley is a pass. No real discrepancies there. She was able to move through that just fine. Active straight leg raise on the left. Ashley was again going to be a pass on this. No real discrepancies or issues on that side. The reverse plank. Ashley was able to hold that for 24 seconds. There should be a fail on this one. A lot of this was due to elbow pain, which she identified that she has hypermobility, so she's able to kind of hyperextend and put too much load onto that elbow. She also lacked a little bit of hip extension or strengthening of the hip flexors and the glutes in order to extend the hips there. She was unable to maintain shoulder extension for greater than 30 seconds. Things that I'd like to focus on to increase her reverse plank and that positioning there are going to be some pulling exercises, some single arm pulling exercises. Also focus on some single arm and bilateral pressing exercises. Lunge variations loaded with time under tension. Unilateral/bilateral carries. Also want to isolate the hamstrings and the glutes utilizing exercises like hip thrusts, hamstring curls, seated hamstring curls, just kind of strengthen up that posterior side. We'll also look further into the hyperextension of the elbow. We'll refer out if need be. On the plank position, full plank position, Ashley's going to be a pass. She was able to maintain a pretty solid position for over a minute. The biggest thing that I saw with this, again, just had to do with the shoulder blade. She was unable to maintain a protracted shoulder, so we got a slight wing scap again when she was in that position. We'll mainly focus on this with isometric core exercises, different plank variations and side plank variations. I also plan to work again on shoulder retraction, so quite a bit of supported bent over rowing, seated supported rowing, or pulling exercises. We'll also work on some pressing exercises as well, and internal external rotation exercises of the shoulder. On the side plank, non-dominant side, Ashley was going to be a fail. She was able to maintain the position for 37 seconds. Lack of core endurance was the primary thing that I just saw with that. She was able to get into a good position. She just wasn't able to obtain that position for very long. Like to incorporate more side plank variations with her with time under tension, things like side hip bridges, hip drops, side plank variations, things like Russian twists as well. Also want to utilize single arm carries on this one. Side plank on her dominant side was going to be 46 seconds. Just again, a lack of core endurance, as well as moving back up to that scratch test and the plank of what we found with the shoulders. Probably a little lack of shoulder strength and endurance within the shoulder and the scapula there. So things that I'll keep in mind again. I'll incorporate single arm carries on this one as well, single arm presses, single arm pulling exercises, as well as bilateral pushing and bilateral pulling, both in horizontal and vertical fashions. Another thing that I'd like to target with Ashley, since I've kind of focused, or I've kind of throughout the assessment, notice what's going on with the shoulder blades is we'll primarily warm up with cable or the crossover symmetries. We'll take her through all ranges of motion just to ensure that the scapula has all ranges of motion: upward, downward rotation, protraction, retraction, and so on and so forth. Moving on to OPEX work. On the assault bike results, Ashley was going to have a total of 60 calories. Her average RPMs are 45 RPMs. She's at a body weight of 138. Her adjusted score is going to be 152, which puts her below the 5% range. Ashley's not a big fan of cardio type of work, which is why she's moved from CrossFit into more of the bodybuilding realm. I had a talk with her though about the importance of aerobic based work and how it can actually boost our ability to gain hypertrophic gains. So after long talks with her, what I plan to do to increase her assault bike, she doesn't have an assault bike where she's at, but I do plan to add about 45 minutes to an hour of steady state cardio, starting with 3 to 4 days a week, and then possibly moving on to 5 to 6 days a week if need be. With that, it not only will target her aerobic base, but it'll also fall in line with decreasing her body fat and increasing that lean muscle mass. Primary goals again are just to add to a booster effect to gaining or to hypertrophic gains. No real FME testing with Ashley yet. I do plan to use FME resistance testing down the road, especially after we get through a couple full phases of working together. No FME energy systems. Again, Ashley's training primarily within the bodybuilding realm right now, so her program design will replicate that as well. I will be testing her aerobic capacity later on when we reassess. That will be the conclusion of my findings and my interpretation of Ashley.